Okay, I want you to picture something for a second. Imagine a world completely devoid of the flick of a switch. Before the industrial age, absolute darkness ruled the night. Once the sun dipped below the horizon, the world didn't just quiet down, it literally ceased to exist visually. For the vast majority of human history, fire was our singular, desperate weapon against the overwhelming, oppressive terror of the dark.
Welcome to this explainer on the economy of light scarcity. Today, we're not just going to rattle off a timeline of inventions. Instead, we're diving deep into the sensory and economic realities that completely dictated everyday human existence. We're going to uncover how the intense scarcity of light shaped family dynamics, forced grueling labor, and ultimately drove humanity to restructure the modern world as we know it.
Part 1. The economy of scarcity.
Let's break down how stark the class divides really were in the pre-industrial world, because they were basically illuminated by the flames people could actually afford. For the working poor in the British Isles, survival meant the rushlight. This was just a stalk of green bark, dried out and dipped in leftover bacon grease. Sure, it cost zero money, but it burned out in a mere 10 to 15 minutes. Moving up the economic ladder, you'd find the heavily taxed tallow candle, and finally, reserved exclusively for the nobility and the church, the exorbitantly expensive beeswax and spermaceti. Your social class literally determined the physical boundaries of your reality after sunset.
This economic divide dictated the entire sensory experience of being at home. If you were an ordinary laborer burning tallow, your house smelled exactly like a slaughterhouse. Because it was rendered from sheep, hog, and beef fat, tallow choked the room with this heavy, really offensive animal stench and thick black smoke. Plus, the wicks required constant trimming, or else the candle would just drown in its own fat. Now contrast this with the wealthy elite. Burning beeswax or crystallized whale wax filled their high-ceiling manors with a sweet, clean aroma and a brilliant, self-sustaining light. They inhabited a completely different sensory universe.
And behind all that smoke and stench was a staggering economic reality. 3 hours. To put that into perspective, back in 1830, a working-class person had to do 3 hours of continuous, grueling physical labor just to earn enough money to purchase a mere 1,000 lumens of light for a single hour.
Because of this sheer expense and the fact that cheap tallow melted so rapidly and needed constant manual trimming, you couldn't just stick these candles up in overhead chandeliers. Consequently, ordinary working families were physically tethered to the immediate radius of the glowing hearth. To move an arm's length away was to plunge into total blindness, where you couldn't read, you couldn't sew, you couldn't work. Darkness basically enforced a strict, inescapable curfew on the working class.
Which brings us to part 2, the luxury of lumens.
Now, to escape that suffocating smoky hearth, humanity went to some incredibly dangerous lengths. To secure the clear, bright light of a spermaceti candle, men literally risked their lives on brutal, years-long oceanic voyages just to hunt the sperm whale. The waxy substance they harvested from the whale's head had to go through this arduous, multi-stage winter process. We're talking boiling, bagging, pressing, and refining it until it finally yielded a pure, white candle that wouldn't melt in summer heat. It was, without a doubt, the ultimate blood-soaked status symbol.
The quality of this light was so unprecedented, it actually became the bedrock of optical science. You've probably heard the term candle power, right? Well, that standard scientific unit of luminous intensity was originally defined by the specific, brilliant, smoke-free light produced by just one standard spermacetic candle. That is how deeply this luxury good embedded itself into human history.
Moving on to part 3, the gaslight revolution.
The 19th century brought a really profound societal shift. In 1792, William Murdoch developed the very first coal-gas system. Fast forward 1807, and London's Pall Mall was glowing with public gas streetlights. By the 1830s, municipal gas networks were spreading like wildfire. This new infrastructure completely supercharged the Industrial Revolution, allowing factories to operate deep into the night. And for the first time ever, city streets were safe after sunset, which effectively birthed the modern night out. It was an absolutely fundamental shift in human social behavior.
But this progress carried a steep, hidden cost that kind of flips our romanticized assumptions about the Victorian era on its head. Sure, gaslight was undeniably brighter, but combusting coal gas indoors released highly toxic carbon monoxide and choking sulfur dioxide right into people's enclosed parlors. It blackened walls with soot and literally withered houseplants. We always picture Victorian ladies fainting because of tight corsets, right? Well, they were also breathing heavily depleted, oxygen-starved air, plagued by chronic fatigue, headaches, and dealing with the very real terror of a catastrophic home gas explosion.
Part 4. Kerosene and the Whale.
There's this super persistent historical myth that claims the discovery of petroleum-based kerosene is what single-handedly saved the sperm whales from extinction by suddenly replacing expensive whale oil. Actually, scratch that. The economic reality is way more nuanced. The truth is, coal-derived kerosene back in the 1850s, combined with heavy Civil War taxes on alternative fuels like camphene, had already crippled the exorbitant whale oil market. The whaling industry was dying out due to pure economics and early coal alternatives long before petroleum ever peaked.
Part 5. The War of Currents. As the 19th century was wrapping up, the quest for completely safe indoor light sparked a massive, high-stakes scientific war. You had Thomas Edison fiercely defending his direct current, or DC system, which flowed in one direction, but required power stations to be built mere blocks from the consumer. On the flip side, George Westinghouse and the brilliant Nikola Tesla championed alternating current, or AC. AC used transformers to step up voltage, transmitting power efficiently over vast distances. Threatened by this clearly superior technology, Edison launched a totally macabre propaganda campaign, even publicly electrocuting animals to convince a terrified public that alternating current was lethal.
Ultimately, though, efficiency triumphed over fear. The real turning point arrived at the spectacular 1893 Chicago World's Fair. Westinghouse's AC system flawlessly and safely illuminated the entire Grand Exposition. This massive, undeniable public success secured the contract for the Niagara Falls hydroelectric project, cementing the interconnected AC power grid that you and I rely on today, and paving the way for safe electric incandescent lighting in ordinary homes.
And finally, Part 6. The LED Breakthrough.
Jumping to the modern era, in 1962, Nick Holonyak Jr. invented the red light-emitting diode, or LED. But here is the crazy part. For decades, a bright blue LED completely evaded the world's brightest scientists. And without blue light, it's literally impossible to mix the spectrum to create white light. So for 30 years, this insurmountable physics hurdle meant that highly efficient white LED bulbs and flat-screen displays simply couldn't exist.
That was the case until a monumental breakthrough in the early 1990s. Isamu Akasaki, Hiroshi Amano, and Shuji Nakamura finally conquered the incredibly complex physics and crystal growth required to forge the blue LED. Their persistence proved so transformative for global energy consumption that the trio was actually awarded the 2014 Nobel Prize in Physics. They had finally unlocked the full visible spectrum for solid-state lighting.
So how exactly do we get the white LED light we use today? Well, you don't actually generate white light directly. First, that highly efficient blue LED generates a monochromatic blue light. This light then passes through a specialized yellow phosphor coating inside the bulb. The mixing of that pure blue light and the yellow phosphor emissions essentially tricks the human eye, producing a broad-spectrum, brilliant white light. It's really a masterpiece of modern engineering.
And the result of this engineering is absolutely staggering. To give you some perspective, to produce the exact same amount of illumination, an LED bulb consumes a mere 5% of the power required by a traditional incandescent bulb. After millennia of our ancestors struggling with scarce, smoky, and prohibitively expensive flames, we have nearly perfected the translation of pure energy into cheap, clean, and completely ubiquitous light. So, from the suffocating, smoky hearths of our ancestors to the brilliant screens in our pockets right now, we have pretty much entirely conquered the dark. But in banishing the terror of the night, we've also banished the stars. So I'll leave you with this. Has our absolute conquest over darkness finally severed our ancient biological and spiritual connection to the night sky? It's definitely something worth pondering tonight when you effortlessly flip that switch.